Hello ladies and gentlemen, and today we are looking at Palworld, the game developed by Pocket Pair. Straight off the bat, I wanted to get started with one thing. Pocket Pair have developed a few games in the past, but one of them specifically is called Craftopia. At the time of recording, Craftopia has been out since the 4th of September 2020, and that's over 3 years ago, and is still in early access development. They have not finished that game. They are a smaller studio, they're an indie dev, and they have not finished a previously released title. I wanted to put that out there right from the get-go. I feel like that is a bit of a black mark, and it needs to be said before anything else. Palworld is a crafting survival game that can be played in co-op 32 multiplayer servers or single player. I played it in single player. That has a heavy emphasis on creature collection, a bit like Pokemon. In fact, very much like Pokemon, to a degree. I'm not going to get onto the controversy of it being so close to Pokemon and all that lot. This game has a lot of controversy about it at the moment. I would say go out, do your research. If you're hesitant about that kind of thing, go out, do your research, and look into the latest news and the latest updates on those subjects, and then make your personal decision. Today, we're just going to be focusing on the game itself and what it's like to play. So straight off the bat, you get dropped off into a handcrafted world. It's not procedurally generated. It is handcrafted, which has some massive benefits. Like Breath of the Wild, like Ark, like Elden Ring. Those games have crafted worlds and take advantage of those massive benefits. It's something I don't think at this moment, as an early access title, Palworld does. I'm hoping they do more with it. The game has NPCs, but they don't do anything. There's some guys sell stuff. Some guys have a few lines of dialogue, but they don't really do anything. They don't flesh the world out that much. The world itself has interesting biomes, colorful biomes, things change. The world is definitely not stagnant. It's not just big field or lots of forests. There are lots of different looking cliffs and different terrain and deserts and ice and snow and fields and forests, and the world does feel nice. You look over at a view of the world itself, and you're like, oh bloody hell, you can see a few things you want to go and see. Or what the hell is that? Spikes coming out of the ground and stuff like that. And as far as I'm aware, if you can see it, you can go to it. So that's a good thing. It's no sort of gatekeeping in that kind of regard. The world itself is based very much like Breath of the Wild. There's going to be cold areas where you need warm clothing, and vice versa with hot areas or desert areas. So you've got to take that into consideration. And then the world is populated full of pals, which are Pokemon-like creatures, which we'll get onto a little bit later. The world itself does have a few things. There's towns or small little villages. Like I said earlier, there's NPCs, and there are dungeons as well, where you can go into, and there'll be pals in there and enemies in there, resource nodes, chests with different items in, and bosses as well. Now, they are not as expansive as, let's say, an MMO dungeon. It's not like, oh wow, it's got a dungeon. It's basically just a few rooms with resources and a bigger pal with more health. Like, the bosses are not stuff with more advanced mechanics or stuff you have to dodge or anything like that. They are just bigger versions of pals with more health. There's nothing sort of unique about them. They do have their own unique traits, I believe, and they are stronger and better in some ways than standard pals. They are boss pals you can capture, but just in general, the pals themselves are, when you're fighting them, aren't necessarily different. So that way, yeah, the game has dungeons and a variety of dungeons, but they aren't special. They aren't like, oh, I don't think they're a selling point. It's like, oh my god, this game has dungeons. No, not really. The game also has bosses throughout the world as well, and those bosses are very similar to, if not exactly the same, to the bosses in the dungeons. They do drop unique resources that can be used to craft stuff later on, but the bosses themselves aren't very special in any particular way. I alluded to earlier that there are bosses littered throughout the world as well, which are which have a higher level. They have a higher difficulty, but then again, they may have special traits and stuff like that. If you want to go around and capture them, they also drop special resources as well for progression later on into other technologies. And we'll get onto the technology tree, which is part of the game's progression later on. One of the final things I want to say about the open world is one of the main, I think, difficulty progression curves in the game is probably the towers, where there are towers and you go in there and have special boss fights. They have a large amount of health compared to anything else I've ran into in the open world. I've done one of them, the very starting one. It had 30k health for me, where a normal boss mob in the open world has maybe 1,000 or 2,000. So they are extensively tougher than a normal fight. They also do have a set of mechanics that are quite fun, specific moves, telegraphing, stuff like that. And I would have liked to have seen maybe scaled down versions of those in dungeons as bosses, or even I would like to have seen them in dungeons, and then something even more mechanically intensive in these big tower fights. And that seems to be, in Pokemon, it would be go around the world and beat all the gym leaders. And that seems to be this game's version of gym leaders, is the tower fights. But they were quite fun. I needed to use my whole party. I needed to use every weapon in my arsenal. I needed to think about what I was bringing in there, perk combinations and stuff like that. So they were very good. But I think that covers sort of the world. It isn't amazing. It's nothing to scream about. It's definitely not a selling point of the game. It's just a tool to host the systems of the world. It's not like Elden Ring, where its world is literally a part of the fundamental aspect of the game. It's just a thing that hosts everything else in this case. So before we get on to pals themselves, I want to get on to a few of the other more basic systems and then have a large chunk of the video dedicated to pals. So we'll go on to pals later on. But one of the things is the progression of the game. I've mentioned sort of boss fights and stuff like leveling. And there is a basic stat system. Every time you level, you get a few points or a point to put into a specific stat like work, speed, or weight, or attack, or defense, that kind of thing. Very basic system there. The main progression, I believe, comes from the technology tree, which is every time you level up, you get a few technology points. It's almost a direct rip-off of Ark. There are like ancestral technologies as well, where if you beat a boss fight or a tower fight or something like that, they will give you a special points towards ancestral technology. Things like incubation chambers and grapple hooks and stuff like that. So that can be quite good. It's nice to link in progression of your character with progression of the world, I think. It ties together aspects of exploring and boss fights and progression and equipment. So I do like that aspect. I wish they lent into it more. I'm not a fan of this just big technology list, click what you want. It doesn't feel organic to me. It doesn't feel like I've earned the technology. In Valheim, for instance, the way you unlock technology is by you find the resource. You pick up copper ore, you learn how to make a copper bar. You make a copper bar, you learn how to make copper nails. And that seems a rewarding mechanic to me in a case of I have learned how to do this thing by exploring, mining, harvesting. Where in this game, it's just, I learned how to make this because I clicked it on a list. So I don't think that's a very interesting mechanic, but I know some people enjoy it in like Ark and stuff. It's just not my cup of tea. So we've covered the world, we've covered tech, and then through tech, you would unlock different ways of building things, from armor, weapons, to workbenches, crafting benches, stuff for your pals as well, like saddles and stuff like that. Again, we'll get onto those a little bit later with what you can do with your pals because it directly links together. So we'll get on to base building. So you go in your technology tree, you unlock some structural things. So you start making a base. The base building in the game is very similar, if not the same, to any other crafting survival game. I would say it's probably a little bit more basic. It does have a few issues. You put your foundation, you put your walls up, you put your roof on. And at that point, I had significant issues with the roof part of base building, where the roof connects to the base doesn't make sense to me in my brain. I spoke to a few friends about it. They didn't really have issues where they would like, you just put a wall there and do that. But it didn't make sense to me. You have to like build up 3 stories to put a roof on the 2nd story and then remove the 3rd story flat wall. I'll put some video clips up now. And it just didn't jibe with me. I don't think it should be like that. It doesn't make sense to build up 3 stories of a flat wall just to put a 2nd story roof on. So there are in my opinion, there are a few issues with the base building itself. Collision, that kind of thing. The other thing is I had massive issues with throughout the whole game is when you put down a box, a chest, or a workbench, craft bench, anything, any interactable object, the hitboxes are a lot larger than the objects themselves. So you can't put chests neatly next to each other. They have to be like spread out a little bit, and that just doesn't look tidy in my opinion. It's more of an aesthetic thing, but the hitboxes are quite large. It became a problem with crafting benches and stuff like that, where you would look at one crafting bench and it would be triggering a different crafting bench. It was very irritating. I might look behind me at a chest and then turn around at a crafting bench and press F, and the chest would open, not the crafting bench. So I'd have to like come out of the chest, wiggle a little bit, make sure it was actually selected onto the crafting bench and then press it. And it's just a little irritating thing with detection and hitboxes. That is irritating. Yes, it's in early access. You kind of expect things like this. At the same time, it's a paid for product, and it's a level of polish I would kind of expected to be finished. Valheim didn't have these things, like V Rising didn't have these kind of things. So it's a basic thing I would expect to. I don't expect it to be there in a paid product. It's just an irritation. But genuinely, the system works fine. It's a bit iffy, but it's fine. You get over it. You get it done, kind of thing. You find out ways of working around it. Build a bigger base. Space things out bigger. Yeah, things might have to be like a block bigger than you want it to be. But genuinely, you can make things look really quite nice. There's stone and rock and sorry, same thing. There's stone. And also there is wood and stuff like that, so you can have a look. There's also furnishings like carpets and fireplaces and bits and pieces like that, so it's all quite nice. So linking pals into base building. One of the fundamentals of this game is what pals do. They're not only companions, they're not only teammates and party members, and things you can collect around the world, but they are also a core instrument into what goes on in your base. I'm a massive fan of games with large amounts of automation in it. Satisfactory, Factorio, modded Minecraft, stuff like that. In this game, I like to, at the moment anyway, where I've got up to around level 20-ish, is Palworld is in the middle and doesn't commit so far as much as I want it to. Where pals come with special skills or traits where they can do lumbering, they can do mining, they can do gathering, they can put things in chests, dependent on what pal you have. Specific pals have specific skills. So if you want something to gather, you can go and get 3 or 4 of that pal and they'll all gather stuff. Or they might also do other things than gathering, but genuinely that's the case. So what you want to do is look into what you have in your base and then go and gather a load of pals or capture a load of pals that you can use inside your base for your specific needs. For instance, if you have a bunch of fire pits or cooking pots on the go, you will need a pal with kindling so that they can use the fire and cook the food. And so there's that kind of thing. If you want a pal to wash down rocks in a special machine, then they're going to need to power the water wheel. They'll need water because they'll need to power the water wheel so rocks can be turned into specific things. And that's generally how it goes is, right, I need handy because I have a bunch of crafting benches and I want my pals to craft my items for me. And so you go and get a bunch of pals of handy and you bring them back and you put them in your base and you look after them and they then make the things in your workbenches. So that's one of the parts of the pals that I was really intrigued with. And I'm actually really, really disappointed. Is I have had nothing but issues with my pals interacting with the things I want them to interact with. There are systems in games like RimWorld where you say what your people, you say what priority specific people should do things in and a priority order. And I really think that Palworld needs a system like that where you say, I want you to focus on cooking. If there's no cooking to be done, then go and mine. That's absolutely fine. But I want you to focus on cooking. And then every time you put a cooking order they will go and stop mining and go and cook because that's the prioritization they've been set. But one of the massive issues is because there's no system like that, I don't know how the AI is going to treat the jobs I've put in order. I have had numerous workbenches that I've stacked up orders, gone exploring for 2 hours, come back, and they've done nothing but farm trees. And I'm like, that's so irritating. I've specifically got you. There's 3 people farming trees, and you're the one with handy. Or why are you farming a tree when there's 2 other people farming trees? I want you to go and craft stuff and leave the other 2 to farm trees. And you might say, yeah, but why have you got someone with handy and logging? He's obviously going to do some logging because he's got logging. Yeah, but he has 2 in handy. So he's a level 2 in handy and he does workbench stuff faster because he's a level 2 in it. So I want him to prioritize that thing, right? Maybe the AI should prioritize the level 2 stuff over the level 1 stuff, that kind of stuff. Really, really good system on paper, but the implementation of it just isn't quite there. I would like a system that says this specific pal can't use this specific bench or tool or farmland or whatever, or a system that says this type of pal should prioritize A, B, and C over D, E, and F. That's what I would like. The biggest thing for me was when I had stuff in my cooking pot, I had stuff on a workbench, and then stuff outside the other side of my base, I had a logging camp. And I'd pick up a specific pal, and I'd go over to the cooking pot, and I'd throw him at it. And he'd walk away. He did it for like 5 seconds, and then turned around and ran the other side of my base, and started doing the logging camp. So I went over there, and I couldn't interact with him, because he was logging. So I had to go back to my PAL management system, unspawn him, respawn him, pick him up immediately, take him back to my campfire, throw him back at it, and finally he started cooking the stuff I wanted him to cook. And then next to the campfire was the workbench. And instead of going straight to the workbench, he ran all the way back to the logging camp and started logging again. there was already people logging, but no one was on the workbench and no one was on the cooking pot. But he would leave what I wanted him to do, or run straight past what I wanted him to do, and run towards the logging camp, and it was infuriating. And the system doesn't work, in my experience, the way it needs to really make the game feel fleshed out and work properly. I've had friends that say they haven't had any issues, and I wish I could say the same, but I can't, and this is my video. So I hope you guys haven't had the same issues. I hope you don't have the same issues, but these are the issues where the system, in my opinion, just hasn't worked properly, and it's infuriated me to the point where I say this side of the system needs really looking at before I can recommend the game for this specific system. So the part of the game for me that is going to really just grab people is the creature collection part of it. If you are a Pokemon fan, if you love collecting things, if you like building squads and matching up different perks and skills of different party members together, then this game is probably going to be right up your alley. Each PAL has its own type, just like Pokemon, and I am going to say just like Pokemon because it is very similar to Pokemon in some regards. In other regards, it's a lot more than Pokemon. But each PAL has its own type: grass, dark, dragon, ice, fire. You know the drill. They are also then have their own moves that they unlock while leveling up. Again, just like Pokemon. And then some of those moves might be super effective against other types. Fire versus grass, for instance. A fire move is going to be super effective against a grass type. Again, just like Pokemon. So if you are into that, that is something you are going to love. Going around the world, collecting the PALs and leveling them up, creating your perfect team. The other side of that is PALs also do extra bits. It's not just their skills, but it's also they have another skill that the actual player can interact with. Now, some of it might be as simple as you can make a saddle and ride the PAL, right? The other part of it may be you can make a saddle and fly around on the PAL, increasing your abilities to explore the world. You can then create a team of PALs that are specifically useful just for world traversal, which is a really cool idea. It's be like, right, I'm going out exploring, so I want to bring this PAL who can fly, and this PAL who can ride around, and I want to bring this PAL who increases the amount of weight I can carry, and this PAL that might make me run faster or increase my player speed. And you can craft a team specifically around exploration, and that's a really cool idea. The other thing is you might want to go mining, right? So you might craft a team about over work speed and mining things and the amount you can carry and that sort of stuff. And then you might want to have a combat focused team, but increase your damage and increase each other's damage and that kind of thing. You might also get PALs, or you do get PALs, there's no might about it, you do get PALs that have stuff a bit like the riding and the saddles, but in a combat focused where you could pick them up and use them as a meat shield. Legitimately, they don't like it, but you can do it. And then you can also, one can jump on your head and shoot a little SMG. And that's really cool. And there's a similar thing for an assault rifle. You can use one as ammunition for a rocket launcher. You can use one that literally shits out eggs and they explode, like as a grenade launcher. So these things get wild, right? There are basic stuff like saddles, and then there's one where, yeah, he shits out grenades. So they do take it above and beyond anything Pokemon can do. And then there's their perks that interact with each other. A friend of mine was literally today was telling me about a perk where it will increase in its damage depending on the number of other Pokemon of a specific PAL. Sorry, not Pokemon PAL. It'll increase its damage dependent on how many of a specific pal you have in your party. So you have one pal and then 4 of another, its damage will increase exponentially. And then become incredibly strong. And they have interactions where if you have another pal in your team versus another type of pal, it'll increase its stats, for instance. And so there's lots and lots and lots of different things you can do in team building, where it's like, well, I've got this guy here and he's a fire type, and then I'm going to put this guy here because he increases damage of fire types in my party, and then I'm going to increase this guy who increases the attack damage of me, so I can have my fire type out there, and I can be doing damage, and then I have the other guy in my party who helps buff my damage, and I have another guy in my party who helps buff fire damage, and then so there's a lot of synergy you can do there. It's not just collect all the pals, it's collect all the pals and then find out what weird and wonderful combinations you can do, and oh wait a minute, now I've got this pal and I've just figured out I can craft gloves that allow me to use him to shit out eggs. And so when it comes down to those big boss fights in the towers, you can really get some cool synergies going there. That's really nice. The ability to do that is really, really nice. And then it goes a little bit further than that, which is every pal you get has have random traits, either none or 1, or I think it's up to 4. The most I've seen on a pal is 4. And it's random traits. And the traits can be bad, like they're lazy. So they do, if you put them to work in your base, they will do 10% or 20% less work speed, which obviously is bad. But if you have them in your party, no biggie, because they're not being put to work anyway. So there's that kind of thing. But then you could have another perk that says increases work speed by 10%. So you don't really want to be using him or her as a party member in your combat team. You want to be using them in your base because they speed up, their work speed is faster. And then you also have things like they do better damage, or do they do less damage than normal, or more damage than normal? And I'm just giving you a few examples of the very basic ones, but it's those traits, those random traits that they are given, means you can start going out and collecting a lot of pals to try and get that perfect pal. And then you keep playing the game, and the game introduces the ability to combine multiple pals into one pal and level up your pal in the case of like experience and leveling them up in that standard RPG way, but also leveling them up with a special statue where you can say, well, I want this pal to be have an increase in a specific stat. So you can really, there's a lot of customization around leveling up your perfect pal, or creating your perfect pal. There is, later on in the game, there is a breeding system where, and those traits and skills pass down into the lower generations, so you can start breeding pals just like in Pokemon to end up with your perfect pal. And then you can go out and have a team that is very, very strong because they've got traits that synergize with each other. They've got perks that synergize with each other. They have abilities that synergize with each other. They have abilities that are super effective against the specific fight you're going up against. And all these things together create a system that is really, really rewarding if you put enough time into it. So even though the base side of pals and pals, the interactions with inside your base, I do not think is there right now, I do think that if you're into collecting and you're into party management and party building and synergies and deck building essentially, because that's what you're doing, you're building a very small 5-man deck to create the best synergies ever, this game could be right up your alley. Right up your alley. Me personally, I'm not a big Pokemon fan. Going out and collecting a lot of things doesn't really bother me. I'd love party building though. I love party building. So that side of it's fantastic, and you can really get your teeth stuck into this. There's a huge amount of perks and combinations of traits and perks and abilities and stuff like that you could really get into. Yeah, and And I think the game really, that's where the game really shines. The ability to traverse the world and be like, oh wait, I haven't seen this pal before. Oh wait, he combos with my other pal. Or oh wait, that ability seems really strong. I wonder what happens if I have another pal that has this X, Y, and Z thing and this X, Y, and Z thing. And I wonder if they synergize with each other, going out and testing it. And the game even provides you a test dummy, which I believe you can, a target dummy that you can go and test stuff on. So it really creates an environment for you to really start testing and breeding and playing around with the systems. So if you're someone to really get your teeth stuck into that, then that honestly Palworld might be so restrictive. Just to talk about performance a little bit, I'm running at 1440p, almost max settings on a 2080 Ti, 32 gig of RAM, and a i7-9700K. It was a top-end rig back in the day, but it's probably like medium spec, lower end medium now. Like a 4070 or 4060 will outstrip it. And it runs pretty well. It needs some optimization. There's a few frame drops here and there, but generally it runs pretty well. The options menu is reasonably good. It's got a good range of options menu for you to tailor your spec. It's got DLSS and stuff like that, so it genuinely, from an early access title on day one, it's pretty good. It's got everything you need it to have. And that's my opinion on Palworld. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you didn't, hit that dislike button. If you did enjoy it, hit that like button, and tell me in the comment sections why you think I'm wrong or right, or what you're hoping from Palworld in the future. That'd be great. So yeah, hit that subscribe button, and hopefully I'll see you in the future. Cheers, bye.